If there was ever a testament to how deep you could sink into the lore of the Outlast franchise, well, you can scroll pretty far down this wiki page, and you can spend an entire work shift marathoning a few videos like these, but even if you watch all that and read all this, the crazy thing to me is that it still feels like we don't know all that much, that there's still a lot of mysteries yet to be solved, and some of these are big and intentionally set up for some future reveal, others are more mundane, featuring questions like where do we reagents use the washroom, and other stuff that oftentimes has strongly suggested or implied answers, or is otherwise largely left up to the player's speculation. For a long time, we barely knew anything about the X-Pop. It took nearly a year and a half after closed beta ended for us to get the X-Pop classification storyline. Before that, everything we knew about the enemies in the game, we basically had to glean from voice lines alone, which do provide a lot of nice information if you're paying attention, but you also want someone to come along and tell you something substantial. Why does Onion Satornish wear a metal nasal strip all the time? Even after we got the evidence documents that we have today, once again, we still don't know that much. Where do the X-Pop sleep? What does Murkoff feed them, and how often? Do they ever get washed or have a chance to take off this nasty bloody gear? Do the scientists or guards or Eastermen ever talk to them? What are their interactions with the Prime assets like? These we do not have concrete answers for, but I must be getting ahead of myself. We should use what we do know for certain as a foundation for the speculation to come. I don't really know how introductory or basic I should get, but X-Pop is shorthand for experimental population because these guys had their origins as patients at Mount Massive Asylum. They were, unsurprisingly, experimented on by Murkoff and afterwards deemed too badly traumatized to be useful as the sleeper agents Murkoff was looking for. Instead, and as was stated in the 1.0 trailer, the X-Pop are forced into a state of constant homicidal rage due to the therapy they suffered. Later on, the X-Pop didn't just come from Mount Massive, but were also sourced directly from Murkoff's charity outreach centers during Lathe 1, and during Lathe 2, failed reagents could be repurposed into X-Pop like Henrietta. Because their default status is just murderous and uncontrollable, in Murkoff's eyes they can only exist as a means to an end, as an element in the reagent's therapeutic progress. There's a brief allusion to the fact that they need to be stored, I like that choice of word a lot, very casually dehumanizing, because just as they are not seen as human, nor are they viewed as particularly valuable. Coil kills a grunt in his Kill the Snitch cutscene, and this does a good job of demonstrating that the X-Pop are expendable from the perspectives of both the Prime assets and Murkoff. You also have the Night Hunter's voice line when he gets hit by a projectile.
Oh shit, they're gonna kill me!
And I take this to mean that we damaged his night vision gear in some way, and usually when you say your boss or your teacher or your parents they're gonna kill you, you're talking about some figurative punishment. Murkoff might actually kill this man, who knows? Other than this, we never get to see the X-Pop die. When we play the game, they are not in danger, they are the danger. But I think the canonical truth is that X-Pop mortality rates are probably not that much better than that of us reagents. Grunts especially. I talked in an earlier video about how reagents are probably heavily discouraged by Murkoff from killing or maiming the X-Pop, but I had a few commenters propose an alternate interpretation where Murkoff rewards reagents who learn how to defend themselves and get aggressive when necessary. This is possible. It might be true to some extent, but the far majority of the corpses we see in the trials environments are reagents. We see very, very few dead X-Pop. The conventional view of the reagent X-Pop relationship is this cat and mouse one, where the X-Pop are the hunters and the reagents are the prey. Despite this, the X-Pop do exhibit an intense fear of us reagents. It's a fun bit of irony when a 7-foot giant is chasing us down with a rusty axe yelling about how they're not scared of us. There's a number of voice lines like this.
I'm getting better. I'm not scared. Don't think I'm scared of you. I'm so tired of being scared all the time.
The first question we're expected to ask is, if they're the ones with the weapons and the strength and the impunity to murder us as they please, why should they be afraid of us? All we can do is run and hide. There's at least 3 good answers, all of them could be true. First, Murkoff might be teaching the X-Pop to fear us. I'm mentioning Kill the Snitch again because it's my baby, but also because it's relevant. We have never explicitly been told why this metal curtain opens up to show us these 4 restrained onlookers watching as we electrocute the Snitch. One plausible theory is that these are X-Pop, or soon-to-be X-Pop, being shown that these are your enemies, these reagents who are electrocuting a man to death for no reason against the wishes of your very sweet and loving local cop, Sergeant Leland Coyle. You have to stop them. If this is the case, the XPOP are probably also shown or told about what us reagents get up to in all the other trials, all the ways in which we torture and murder the trial victims. When you think about it, we don't really have a very defensible track record. So when you're told about someone who's done all these horrible things to so many different people, yeah, you're probably justified to be afraid of them. The second reason for their fear could just be trauma. One look at the XPOP and you know they've suffered a lot, not just at Murkoff's hands, but also probably from their early lives too. Remember that a sizable portion of these people signed up for the therapy like us, so they were never living in really nice circumstances either. When their lives are bad like this, they probably just live in fear of everything all the time, even if irrationally. The third reason is that we are intruders. When we enter the trials, we are invading their homes. The XPOP have voice lines which show they perceive the trials to be their homes, either by conditioned delusion or just because it really is the truth, they haven't been outside the facility in months or years. So knowing this, would you want a group of 4 random strangers just barge into your home, start running around and fueling generators you didn't ask them to? That's so weird, I'd be very afraid. But it's okay, because remember the XPOP have a source of comfort. They have a shining light in the Prime assets, who the XPOP are said to look up to as charismatic leaders or authorities. It's just a shame how few examples of this we see in actual gameplay. XPOP and Primes will walk right by each other, no reaction, no acknowledgement in either direction. It seems to be the job of the idle grunts alone to hype up the Primes to us reagents with their very fearful voice lines. I don't know, there's never any cutscene where Otto points to 3 grunts standing in a row and he's like, "Men, kill these reagents and groan about their chops." And the XPOP are down on their knees swearing their eternal loyalty. Something like that, you know? I think it'd add a lot of flavor by just tying together these elements in the trials. Easterman explicitly confirms that the Prime assets have control over the XPOP, so I think it's likely that the Primes instruct their XPOP on where to patrol and what to do in the trials environments. I think it's likely that they punish or even kill those who don't fall in line. There might be XPOP who are favored by the Primes, or who receive special treatment for performing as requested. There may even be, as Clyde Perry writes, carnal relationships between them. We don't know whether or not certain XPOP are exclusively sworn to certain Primes, like maybe one grunt will only participate in coil trials, or even only one specific coil map. We'd never see this in gameplay, of course, because all the grunt models are completely randomized across all trials, but in lore it is interesting to think about. When the trial is done and the reagents have either died or escaped, what becomes of the XPOP? I'd love to imagine that they're just left to roam the trial's environments until the next trial begins, but also this doesn't seem possible, because we know that Murkoff's cleanup crews have to go in and do their thing between each trial playthrough. Maybe not every single time, particularly if the reagents failed, but objectives still have to be reset, traps need to be rearmed, items have to be restored to their containers, windows need repairing, door locks need to be placed back on, corpses removed. This might be a topic for a future video, because there's actually so much stuff Murkoff has to do to reset a trial to a playable state, and this has weird consequences for the plausibility of the facility's functioning, but I digress. I was saying, the XPOP have to be pulled aside and kept out of the way while Murkoff is cleaning up. How does this happen? It's probably something like a Murkoff scientist announces over the intercom that all XPOP are to return to the insertion gates, and the fear conditioning is so strong and the threat of punishment is so great that the XPOP will not dare to disobey. That doesn't mean the cleanup crew is bold enough to enter the trial while the XPOP are still active, of course. I think the security failures after Lathe 1 would cause Easterman and friends to have become much more risk-averse, but yes, the XPOP probably enter their EIGs and either wait in some kind of shuttle-like limbo or go back to their sleep rooms until the next trial begins. If any disgruntled XPOP do disobey or want to try lingering in the trials, I think it's easy enough for Murkoff to just fill the entire trial with some kind of sleep gas, wait until the offending XPOP become unconscious, and then he can handle them however they choose afterwards. So let's go back a bit. I mentioned that the XPOP do have sleep rooms. Sorry that I don't remember where this is confirmed, but it was. One of the devs kind of teased the idea that the Primes and the XPOP have their own sort of sleep rooms just as we reagents do. It's an interesting idea worth exploring. The XPOP live a sort of mirror life to us reagents. I'd like to think that as we're in the shuttle on the way to our trials, watching Easterman on the TV tell us that we have to kill the snitch and he'll let us out, the XPOP might be in their insertion gates being told that they have to kill us reagents and then he'll let them out. If we want to keep going forward with this parallels notion, I'd wager that because we reagents can't take off our night vision goggles or ESOPs, the XPOP probably also can't take off their specialized gear. For the hard grunts, that'd be their headgear and maybe armor. The Berserker probably can't take off his metal fist casement. We are certain the Night Hunter's goggles are bolted to his head because he says so. That makes the showering deal, the hygiene deal, if it happens, much more complicated. You know how the murkoff guard in the sleep room, he announces that the trial has been hosed down and reset? I envision a similar deal for the XPOP. Murkoff guards literally point a hose at them and spray. That's as far as their hygiene routine will go. I don't know, maybe they get to brush and floss too, with the exception of Wilhelm. I also wonder about the food situation. The only confirmation we have of that is this single line in this one evidence document saying that Murkoff does spend an unspecified amount of money on feeding the XPOP. How often, how much, and of what, we can't say. I wonder if Murkoff gives more food or better food to the XPOP who are more successful in hunting down reagents. I wonder if the unproductive XPOP are just left to starve. It would not surprise me if there's this rewards-based system to give the illusion that the XPOP can earn themselves a better life, or potentially even freedom, if they can just win enough of Murkoff's favor. A recently released evidence document has suggested that Murkoff is using their dead reagents as edible slurry. Edible loosely defined, but in classic Murkoff fashion, they are probably feeding this to the living reagents as well as the XPOP. Forced cannibalism in a very economic, self-sustaining cycle. But maybe this is why the big grunts in particular have expressed a taste for human flesh. We sound like lunch, they just need a little protein. I digress again. We were talking about what it's like for the XPOP when they're not inside an active trial. Well, we know that the EIGs are the means of the XPOP's exit and entry into the trials. Before we had the official term of the EIG, a lot of people called these things elevators. I can see that, they have that look about them. I wonder then, if they really are elevators, that the XPOP sleep rooms might be directly above or directly below the trial environment. Isn't that the most convenient setup? In an overall sense, I'm willing to assume that the XPOP have a much less comfortable sleep room equivalent than us reagents. The XPOP have already achieved their final purpose in Murkoff's eyes. Murkoff does not aspire for them to be anything greater, to do anything more. That makes them expendable and replaceable, and while that is also true of us reagents, Murkoff has plans for us post-rebirth, so they have to treat those of us who survive to some passable standard of care. On the contrary, I could easily see the XPOP being stuffed into spaces the size of coffins, where they sleep and remain between trials. We know Murkoff is extremely ruthless when it comes to cost savings. They say the XPOP are stored, that they need upkeep, as if speaking about property. Why treat the XPOP to any form of human compassion when further neglect and mistreatment will encourage them to be more effective killers? This is probably also safest. I don't think Murkoff will risk allowing these broken, raging, and extremely volatile people to have direct contact with one another. They might hurt each other, they might hurt themselves. Murkoff loves to use solitary confinement and heavy chemical and physical restraints. This is most likely the experience of any XPOP when they aren't left to roam free in the trials. Only when they really need medical care is when Murkoff might privilege them with a bit of attention. And when I say really need, I mean it's either something that's easily fixable or they're probably getting taken out back. All Murkoff needs to care about is whether their XPOP can move. That's it. They need to move so they can hunt and kill. In the evidence document, it's written that Murkoff will give the grunts minimal bandages or splints to maintain basic motility. I'd add that they need their sight and hearing intact as well, but you have the Berserker who disproves the first point there at least. As for further special treatment, we've seen in the trailer that Easterman will speak directly to the Prime assets, but the XPOP are far below the Prime assets. I think Easterman is much too busy drinking urine and licking Luparas to lower himself to a conversation with these grunts. If I have been thorough in my reading, the only reference we have so far of Murkoff to XPOP communication has been this lone evidence document, where a pusher is interrogated over what he might know about the Amelia situation, and these were exceptional circumstances. In less exceptional circumstances, the XPOP might get recorded messages on the televisions like us reagents. We've heard them recite the same Murkoff messaging we reagents receive. A male grunt says, "Obedience facilitates the automotive," which is a Mallard's prolapsed sum of Avelanos saying obedience facilitates autonomy. And we also have evidence that the doctors speak to the XPOP, probably during the surgical operations where they're getting all their experimental augmentation and whatnot. XPOP will talk about what the doctors have told them. The Berserker says that he was told that blindness is a doorway, a miracle. Grunts will say the doctors told them they have to kill us. So we do know there is some interaction between Murkoff and the XPOP, and outside of instruction and propaganda and coercive threats, it also comes in the form of human experimentation, as we've said. All this augmentation, these metal implants, for the big grunts, there's the limb lengthening and hormone therapy. We know Murkoff is responsible for this, but that's all. So this leaves open a lot of questions. How does Murkoff choose which X-Pop becomes which class? It's written that there can be some overlap between the classes, but we never get to see that. We've never seen an X-Pop that's half Berserker, half Imposter or anything like that, and I don't think we ever will. But is there movement between the classes? Is it like having people in a company changing positions or their job titles over time? Does a grunt ever get turned into a screamer, a pitcher into a big grunt, or a Jaeger into a pouncer? It's stuff like this I'm curious about. The one case we're all well acquainted with is Henrietta, former reagent, being given hormone therapy and limb lengthening to transform her into a big grunt, and from this big grunt status, she was transformed further into Signala's very first Jaeger. I like to think this is common, but I also imagine there's some logic to the direction of transformation. I don't think a Jaeger will ever become a pouncer, but maybe there are cases where, like, a pusher or a night hunter is a real disgusting failure inside the trials, and then Murkoff decides, that's it, you've lost your night vision privileges, or you've lost your gas mask privileges, and then there's just a basic loser idle grunt from there on out. Speaking of idle grunts, I wanted to give these guys very special attention. My running theory is that they are not substantively different from the patrolling grunts. There is no evidence document differentiating the two. I think the idle grunts are just grunts who see that there's no point in attempting to please Murkoff, so they have given up entirely. Or maybe they don't want to be the cause of further violence in the trials, which is a bit respectable, isn't it? They tanked all of Murkoff's torture, and now they refuse to perpetuate the cycle. It makes them real cannon fodder, and it gives Murkoff or the Primes even more reason to dispose of them in the most horrible of ways, but they've chosen to just sit around anyways and keep to themselves, and they only become a danger if you approach them uninvited. I'm still gonna throw all my leftover bricks at them, but I appreciate them choosing some semblance of humanity in a very terrible situation. This reluctance to kill, though, it's not only exclusive to the idle grunts. I mentioned a voice line earlier. One grunt sounds completely manic when he tells us that he's being forced to do this, like he's trying so hard to excuse his own murderous actions.
The doctor said that I had to!
Another grunt during her execution animation will tell us,
I just want to get out too.
and there's that tinge of regret there, and in both these cases, they make it clear that they feel they have no other option, and no hard feelings, but they've got to kill us. And now that I think about it, maybe this makes the idle grunts the wisest of all. There is this belief expressed by the patrolling grunts that if they kill us reagents, Murkoff will let them free. We know that to be a lie, we know. But the grunts will say to themselves all the time, they're getting better, they're accepting the therapy, as if Murkoff is listening and will reward them. No, you guys don't have to do all this, you're here for life no matter what you do. That's enough. There is another distinction, the one between the civilian grunts and the hard grunts. I think this is enforced by Murkoff themselves, because no way the grunts are just scavenging this weird headgear and stuffing wires in their mouths at their own leisure. And scavenging is the right word, by the way. It's said that the X-Pop have to do a lot of fending for themselves in the trial environment, scavenging clothing, improvising their own weapons. Anyway, I like to think this is the cruel contradiction of Murkoff's system of reward and punishment. Hard grunts are better killers, more aggressive, more threatening. They served Murkoff better, and so Murkoff rewarded them by augmenting them with even more uncomfortable gear. One hard grunt says this: there must be a bunch of metal rods just stuffed inside him.
Behind my eyes, close in my spine.
In how many videos have I brought up the hard grunts concept art, by the way? It's been a lot. We're doing it again. I love these annotations because we get something of a glimpse into the actual personal details of these grunts' lives. Their thoughts, their feelings, their desires, their psychologies in general. This is the juicy stuff to me. Look at all this. Are we saying that the hard grunts keep severed hands tied to their waists because they crave their affirming touch? Those are gonna get cold after a while. You need to replace them with fresh hands on a regular basis. Or the bags of flesh labeled reagent or X-Pop. Does this hint at possible X-Pop infighting? Validating my earlier claim where I said you couldn't put a bunch of X-Pop in the same room and expect them to play nice. Non-castration does not equal fear of... What? What are we saying, bro? Empathy does not equal healing? That one's understandable. If the X-Pop have empathy for the reagents, they won't kill them, and without killing them, the X-Pop won't benefit from any therapeutic healing. At least Murkoff says so. Traumatic amnesia. It would make sense if amnesia was given to the X-Pop to prevent them from remembering their past lives and encouraging the notion that the trials are the only thing they've ever known, that these places really are their homes. The question of lucidity is an interesting one. With the combination of chemicals and psychosis gas, and now potential amnesia, maybe the trials do look very much like the real outside world the X-Pop remember. Maybe they've fully bought into this simulated reality. Just recall that this is very old concept art I'm reviewing, shown back from way back in 2021, and so some of these world building details may be outdated or retconned, we don't know. So get this off my screen. Lucidity. The boots are OP on Syndra, but some X-Pop show more awareness of reality than others. One of the most revealing voice lines to be added to the game recently was from this female hard grunt who says,
My son.
I talked earlier about the X-Pop being encouraged to hunt us reagents by threat of further torture or the promise of freedom. It wouldn't surprise me if Murkoff employs other elements as leverage against the X-Pop. Carrots on sticks. The carrots don't even have to be real. Maybe this grunt never had children. Maybe Murkoff just showed her a picture of some random child and used the power of suggestion and heavy chemical dosage to guide her into believing this was a picture of her non-existent son. But this is exactly what I mean, right? When I say things are left up to our speculation. Murkoff is so tricky and interesting with their modes of operation. This grunt could totally have a real son. All the X-Pop might have families and friends still wondering where they've gone. The X-Pop might still know this. You'd work harder, you'd do anything, even if you know you're being exploited or tricked, so long as you felt that there were people in the real world you had to get back to. Does that make the plight of the X-Pop that much more sorrowful? Maybe not for those who have regressed to a completely animalistic or permanently dissociative state. If you stop perceiving objective reality, does life become a little bit more awesome? One grunt has no dialogue at all, they just snarl like a dog. But this might not reflect any kind of regression or loss of mental acuity. It's possible Murkoff cut out their tongue, or maybe purposefully damaged their Broca's area, inducing the condition known as aphasia, where they can no longer produce any intelligible language. But we know the Screamer is absolutely living outside of reality. That guy is experiencing constant hallucination. His life is a nightmare from which he cannot awaken, until we throw a bottle at him and then he screams and that provides him some cathartic relief. Allegedly. This evidence document is written in such a way so that it's hard to trust what's said. Like, this last line is obviously very ironic in how wrong it is. Maybe Murkoff is reading the Screamer's behavior in entirely the wrong way too. But catharsis or not, it is clear this fellow's having a rough go of it. The Pusher is a different story. He is both aware and unaware at the same time. This document we talked about earlier describes him as a drug-addled beatnik, but I think we're supposed to feel like he could have that deeper wisdom beneath all his mad ramblings, like he's unlocked a higher plane of thinking through his psychedelic journeying. Again, total speculation, and the truth could run in either direction. The Pusher does express a kind of sardonic recognition of the situation we're all in.
It's Murkoff brand. Of course it's safe. Have you learned yet? You better, or they'll just keep stitching you up and sending you back.
Now this is probably expected, but there is no happy ending for any of the X-Pop. Once they've outlived their usefulness and they're too injured to hunt, or they become too hard to control or too disobedient, Murkoff will liquidate them without hesitation. In the current state of the game, it's hard to imagine they get turned into a trial victim, because if this was the case, wouldn't some of our victims sound completely insane and way more X-Pop-like? So, death is the only outcome. Maybe they can live out their days as idle grunts for a little while, but as I'll explain shortly, that will probably be a short-lived stint. They can't get turned into reagents because, as Easterman claims, they are too far gone to probably accept the therapeutic lessons. I imagine the leading cause of death for the X-Pop is infection. All these metal implants and sketchy surgeries, and all the hazards in the trial environments, and the bricks and bottles from the reagents, and the malnutrition and the lack of proper sleep, and the chronic inflammation and buildup of cortisol from all the stress. And you might say, but infections are nothing to Murkoff. Look at all the medical miracles they can pull off. True, but also balance that against Murkoff's miserly ways. These grunts who they've got to start constantly pumping full of antibiotics, and then they complain they're in too much pain to move, so you've got to treat their sores and ulcers and drain all those abscesses, and there's a threat of contagion, and you want a walking plague casting AoE infection wherever they tread, and it's like, if I'm Matthew Murkoff, I'm saying, wow, what a load of pointless work and money wasted. Take that one out back, we've got extra slurry for dinner tonight, guys. I do wonder how long your average X-Pop stays alive. Like, you look at what a sorry state these guys are all in, constantly bloodied and worn down, and their skin is just totally gray for some reason. I can't see you sticking around for much longer, pal. I give you 2, maybe 3 years. It could be a couple months or weeks or days if something particularly bad happens, and that's no small chance. The Screamers probably have the shortest lifespans. They're always in non-REM sleep. That sleep quality is horrible. I don't think they ever get to sleep truly, even though they're always trying. It's basically permanent insomnia. You die faster than that sort of thing. Pouncers must be a similar case. They, by their own choice, are always pushing so much metal and wire into their skin. Are you not dying of tetanus anytime soon? Like, please? I wonder if the Jaegers live the longest just because Murkoff is willing to commit more to keep them alive. I wanted to mention this earlier, but does it not sound reasonable that some classes of X-Pop are more expendable than others? I actually don't know. It's hard to really say Murkoff invests more into different classes of X-Pop because all it is surgery. You don't value an X-Pop for their differential ability to hunt and kill reagents, you just outfit them with different stuff. and as we've seen, Murkoff can easily harvest that stuff off corpses and put them onto a different X-Pop and say, okay, go kill the reagents with your newfangled metal fist and engineered syphilis. No worries if you die, we can just take that metal fist and the syphilis and give it to someone else. You know, with this video, I don't know if I wanted to go somewhere, prove some kind of point. Maybe the whole point is that the lives of the X-Pop are totally miserable. We reagents can hate them because they're trying to kill us, but if I had to choose, I think I would rather be reagent than X-Pop. I at least have the chance to rebirth, and even though that's not true freedom, being a puppet sleeper agent doesn't sound that bad. You get to live a semi-normal life again for at least a little while. I haven't watched Squid Game, but isn't this similar to being either a contestant or a guard in that universe? Both of them are victims, and both of them are in this bad situation against their will. And maybe you think the grass is greener on the other side, but maybe that's because the hose is duct taped to your neighbor's hand and they're forced to water the lawn 24/7 without reprieve. You know, some things happen in our lifetimes, like some things actually end up happening. It's crazy.